And then I did them for months. And then eventually, like, I was like, wow, I don't have any pain anymore. And then one day I could just, like, I guess the range of motion was more gradual. But now, I mean, I can fully do all exercises now, all stretches. I haven't had pain in my hip in over a year. And I feel like I'm fully back to where I was before all of this nightmare started.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to reach out to me. It was pretty cool. My assistant Mary, she kind of manages comments and things on Instagram, and she saw that you had left a really sweet comment about your experience with the FAI Fix, and she was like, "You got to follow up with this lady and hear more about this story." And so that's what we're here to do, is just for you to just tell sort of the backstory of how are your hips and how did the FAI Fix help them, and I'd just love to hear more.
So my problem started in 2019 and it happened pretty suddenly. Like I remember I would get out of my car and my left hip was starting to buckle, like it would buckle and I would sort of trip and almost fall to the ground. And at first it was just happening sort of sporadically. And then over time it was getting worse and worse. And then the pain started. And I started to freak out because my whole family has a history of hip problems. So my mom, my grandma, my uncles have had hip replacements. So I was freaking out because here I am in my 30s and I'm like, am I going to need a hip replacement? Because I hadn't injured my hip as far as I knew. And it got so bad that I was like, as soon as I'd go from a sitting to standing position, I mean, I would have searing pain in the front of my hip, shooting down the front of my leg. My hip would pop and make, actually, when I first watched your YouTube videos, I remember it was either you or your partner talking about like the snapping. My hip was starting to do that a lot. And at the time when it was getting really bad, so this was in 20, maybe middle of 2020, like I couldn't go from sitting to standing. I was limping all the time. I had 3 jobs. So I was teaching English online, I was working at the college, and I was delivering food. And delivering food was my supplementary income that I was using to pay off debt. But getting in and out of the car was getting so hard because going from like a flexed hip and then externally rotating that hip to swing it out of the car multiple times. I mean, I was just bawling. I'm like, I can't hardly even walk anymore. And so I just kind of thought, because I have a history of like, I used to work out all the time and I took massage therapy. So I was like, maybe I'm just really, really tight. So I would try to stretch. And that's when I realized, wow, I have no range of motion. Like I would try to sit cross-legged and my right knee would be on the ground and my left knee would be like at a 45-degree angle. And I would try to push it down and it felt stuck. Like I was like, why does it feel like there is something stuck in my hip? And then I got really nervous. So that's when I went to, I can't remember if it was just a GP or who I saw, but I had x-rays done. And they said you don't have any signs of like arthritis or deterioration in the bone to where you'd need, a hip replacement or whatever. Um, and so I got diagnosed with hip impingement and I had never heard of it before. And once I Googled it, I was like, I have like all of these symptoms. So they referred me to physio, and I didn't have any insurance at the time for physio, so I was paying out of pocket, and I had spent something like $700, and I felt like it was getting worse because they would just do this thing where they had a machine that they would just hold up to my hip and kind of rub it on. I don't know what it was, like a ultrasound. I don't know what it was. And just do this light pressure stuff and try to move my hip passively, and it just wouldn't go. Like it was just always stuck. And I was getting even more worried because I'm like, why am I not getting any better? And I'm like, I can't afford this. Plus, I'm not going to be able to keep my job much longer because I like, and I have old videos of myself just limping and hobbling around because the pain was so bad. And again, I was trying to do stretches in bed, like a butterfly stretch and pigeon pose and all those things. And I just could not move my hip. And it was so bad that I would sit on the floor to do my makeup and one leg would always have to be extended because I couldn't even bend it. I couldn't externally rotate my hip hardly at all anymore. Um, So then I was like, there's got to be something that can help me. So I started searching online and I came across a different guy on YouTube, and he suggested these resistant bands, like pretty tight resistant band exercises, where you kind of put it around a pole and you do this stuff. And I was doing that religiously and nothing was helping. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is my fate. And it was really making me depressed. I'm like, I'm never going to be able to work out again. I'm never going to be able to get in and out of my car. I'm not going to be a functional human being, because it was just deteriorating fast. And then I came across your program and I started reading reviews and I started watching. I don't remember if I watched your YouTube videos first or if I found your program through Google and then started researching through YouTube. But your story sounded so similar to mine, just the way you guys both talked about um, your limitations and your symptoms. And I mean, you guys were both young, and I was like, I'm young. And then just seeing your progression and how you could do the splits and all these things, I'm like, and then I read the reviews and I'm like, this is totally worth the money. And I didn't even have a credit card at the time. So I used my mom's credit card and I bought it, and I went through all of the tests. And the one when you stood up and brought your knee to your chest, I mean, my right knee I could bring all the way to my chest, and my left knee was like a foot lower. And I was like, and I was taking pictures in the mirror, and I'm like, this is bad. And because I used to be really quite flexible, and I just didn't understand what had happened. So I did all the tests, and I realized like the flexion and external rotation were like, there was like, I can't remember, like I printed out the manual and stuff, and I can't remember exactly which ones because it was a couple of years ago, but there were two that were really bad for me. So I did it really gentle at first. I started doing the tissue work because I already had a foam roller, I had a lacrosse ball, and I had like a jackknobber, but it was just a little bit different. So I started doing those. I started doing the stretches like every day in the hot apartment with no air conditioning. Started doing that, started doing the strengthening. And then like people were noticing that I wasn't limping as much. And then I did them for months. And then eventually, like, I was like, wow, I don't have any pain anymore. And then one day I could just, like, I guess the range of motion was more gradual. But now, I mean, I can fully do all exercises now, all stretches. I haven't had pain in my hip in over a year. And I feel like I'm fully back to where I was before all of this nightmare started. And I told my
Wow.
physiotherapist, I've put it on social media. I'm like, if you ever have hip impingement, because I mean, I was looking at surgery, I was going to the chiropractor, I was doing massages, everything, and nothing helped me except for the program. And it really, like, I feel like it cured me. So I haven't had any issues since.
That's incredible. That's super cool. That's very touching to hear because I know how scary it is to go from like, why is all this happening when I'm so young, when I'm 30? It happened for me when I was 26, I think, and to
Yeah.
have a family history of like everyone in your immediate family getting hip replacements. And you're like, oh, here it is at 30.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you had tried stuff to try to fix it. You tried to stretch and you tried to go to physical therapy, which usually you think like physical therapists, like they should be able to fix me or at least get me heading in a right direction. But
Yeah.
it sounds like you got a lot of really passive sort of treatments where they just sort of pointed a laser gun at you and gently moved your hip around and didn't teach you how to move or do anything to yourself.
And that's
And so to go,
exactly mentioned that, like the passivity of physio. And that's exactly what I was experiencing. And yeah, it was horrifying.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sadly, that's the experience of a lot of people, mine as well. Which isn't to say that there aren't some really brilliant physical therapists out there, but it's very hit or miss in my experience. So, but it's amazing to me that you went from that sort of pretty dark place of all that happening in your 30 to coming out of it and saying I'm like pain free and feel completely normal and full range of motion and all that stuff. What do you think was different about what you were doing in the FAI Fix that made that change?
Well, for me, like I know, like I liked the three-step process. So like I said, I was like really scared of further because I was doing this kind of blind because I wasn't willing to take pills. I didn't want to have surgery. I just didn't feel right about the physio. And I was like, I don't really know these people online. And what if I'm doing further damage? So I was really cautious when I went into it. And so I did the three steps separately at first. So I just started with tissue work. And I didn't notice a relief in anything except for I had less discomfort, like right after I would do some of the work. And so then I was like, okay, this feels like it's going in the right direction. And then I built on top of that. Then I got into the stretching because I was so afraid at that point of doing damage because I was like, why is this so stuck? And and then getting into the strengthening and I just noticed over time I wasn't feeling worse. I was just slowly feeling better. And for me, I think it was the 3-step because when I got into the tissue work, like normally I used to just roll my hips because I've had a foam roller for 10 years. So I would just roll the side of my glutes kind of thing. But getting really into those muscles that you guys explained and using like getting deeper and deeper with the more targeted stuff, that made a big difference for me. And then realizing how weak I was in certain areas and like how out of balance my body was. And because I mean, I'd worked out a lot in the past, but I always did the same things. So my body was really out of balance. And just, I think it was the 3-step process for me. Like I said, building on top of each thing, I just noticed more and more progress. And then it got to the point where other people were noticing, like, you're not limping. Like my grandma was really concerned because she's like, what is wrong with you? Like you used to be so active and now you can hardly walk. And she's like, do you need a cane? Like what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't know. And I'd just be bawling and just, I just feel like it was that 3-tiered approach that made a huge difference. Cause that, like I said, doing it one at a time, and just getting slowly and slowly better and stronger and more flexible and feeling less of that stuck. I just was like, this is definitely like what I need to be doing. And actually now
Nice.
I'm pregnant and I thought, okay, maybe my hip problems are going to come back now, just, being pregnant. And they talk a lot about pelvic floor and hip stuff. But I haven't had anything come back. So it's been great.
That's fantastic. It makes me so happy to hear because I also know that there's so much, I don't know how to say it politely, there's so much crap online these days. And I think everyone, myself included, has sort of my guard up against scams and shams and hucksters and people that aren't really, maybe don't know what they're talking about online or haven't lived through something or are just in it for the money or whatever. And I have no doubt
Yes.
that that's in the mind, even when people look at our program, even though we try to give you as much security as possible. If it doesn't work for you, you get all your money back. Like, I don't like, there's no physical therapist that offers that. And we have got so many free videos on YouTube and so many testimonials and like things to give people as much faith and encouragement that, hey, it's worth giving it a shot if you've tried other things and it hasn't worked. But even still, I know that there's just a lot of like, oh, let's see what these dudes on the internet say about hip impingement. And so I'm happy that you gave it a shot. I'm thrilled that it worked for you. I'm not surprised because I also lived through the same thing, and it seems to work for the vast majority of people. At least puts them on a track of feeling and moving better, if not making them feel completely normal. So I'm happy that you gave it a shot. I'm happy that it got you to where you wanted to go. I'm curious if you could give any piece of advice for someone else in your situation, a young woman or guy or anyone, who's 20, 30, even 40 or above, they're dealing with hip impingement. What's like the one most important thing that you would recommend that they do?
Well, I've actually had this happen because I had mentioned my story on social media and I had someone reach out to me who is, I think, around my age. And I mentioned the program because I'm like, I had already spent, you talking about the risk factor. I had already spent triple the amount of money on physio. It didn't work at all. So I'm like, well, what's $200? Even if for some reason I didn't get my money back, like say this was a scam and I spent $200 and didn't get my money back, I'm like, that's still only a third of what I've spent on physio. So to me, it wasn't a huge risk because I'm like, I read like every testimonial on your site. And and I have told other people to do this program. Basically, like make sure that what you have is hip impingement. I had that verified by more than one person. My physio looked at my x-rays, the doctor, and I think it was sent to another, I don't know if it was an orthopedic, I don't know who it was, and they all confirmed that I had hip impingement. So like the first thing would be make sure that that's what you have. Because initially, like I said, I thought I'm going to need a hip replacement. Like there's probably wearing down of the bones and whatever. And they made sure that that was not the case. And then like, I mean, go right into doing, because to me, like I said, the FAI Fix didn't come with a lot of risk. So just give it a shot, because for me, like, physio didn't make any difference at all. Like, I didn't even have a 5% improvement with physio, and I was doing everything that they told me to do, all of the exercises, all of the, like, I was a very active participant in my treatments, and nothing, it didn't help me at all. And I think because another thing is they basically had me going straight into stretching and strengthening, and the tissue work, I think, was the biggest thing for me that helped me to get into the stretching and strengthening, because I was so tight and had so much, like, I don't know if it was fascia or I don't know what it is, but it was incredibly painful. Like, I couldn't believe how bad my tissues felt. Like, I think that was what kind of jump started me into being able to even get into the other stuff, because I had to do so much tissue work before I could do any of the other stuff. And that's what I wasn't getting in physio. And I mean, the stuff that they were doing was such light. They would kind of massage it, but it was so light that it wasn't doing anything. Like, I really had to get in there. Once I got in there with the lacrosse ball, wow, it made a huge difference. Yeah. So I mean, just, I mean, getting the proper diagnosis, and then, I mean, getting into the program, because I, like I said, for me, I tried everything else that I knew about anatomy to try to fix my hips, and talking to my family members who've had bad hips, and nothing helped. So just doing the program, like, I have told people to do it, and even my physio I told.
Yeah. You mentioned the tissue work twice, and I wanted to sort of highlight that because I still to this day find it to be one of the things most missing in traditional recovery programs. Most people, if they have pain, they think I need to stretch something, I need to go do some yoga or something, or maybe I need to go strengthen something. Or maybe in physical therapy you'll get a combination of stretching and strengthening. But so often the targeted tissue work, which is the key, is left out. Like you said, really getting in there with specialized tools into the nooks and crannies of your hip frees up the hip joint, which then makes stretching feel way more comfortable in my experience, and makes it where you can actually do some of the strength training without compensating. It's sort of like tissue work unlocks the door for stretching and strengthening. And so it's like that that three-tiered approach. I continue to be amazed that it's not more included. And I think one of the reasons is that people still equate self massage or self tissue work with foam rolling. Tissue
Yes.
work is maybe rolling around on a foam roller, which can be a decent starting point for some muscles of the body, like the quads or something. But to get into the crevices of your hips and the adductor attachment points and deep into the glutes, you need to do targeted tissue work. And so we'll keep beating the drum on that one, but I'm glad that it's not coming only from me and someone else is emphasizing the importance of that aspect of things.
To add to that, in physio they really focused on, like, the outer hip, and when I started doing the program, I did a lot of the adductor stuff, because it was the goalie stretch that I was like, I couldn't do it at all, hardly. I was so tight in my adductors, they just burned. Like, I could hardly stretch them at all when I started. And so starting to do, like, tissue work and stretching in there felt counterintuitive at first. I'm like, how is this going to help my outer and front of my hip where I get all the shooting pain? And that was one thing, another area I just remember that I really focused on, that they didn't even mention in physiotherapy, was the adductors. And I did a ton of work on adductors, especially well, I did both sides, but the left side was what was so bad. And yeah, like, I just had no idea that something that was not bone related could cause that stuck. Like, I mean, I would, like, pull my hip with my hand, and I was like, why is it stuck? Like, why does it feel like there's a piece of bone jutting out somewhere that's preventing me from putting my leg down? Because I had never experienced that, and it felt like a bone. And so then once I got into the tissue work, like I said, it was very slow, but that was when I could start increasing the range of motion. And I had to do a ton of adductor in addition to, like, piriformis and all those other muscles in the glutes and stuff that were so rock solid on me. They were so tight.
Yeah, I think the adductors are the forgotten child in the world of physical therapy. It's all about the glutes, or if it's the upper body, it's all about the rotator cuff. Just give them some hip flexor stretches and some glute strengthening, and send them on their way, or strengthen the rotator cuff and call it a day. But yeah, there's there's a lot more muscles in the hip area rather than just the glutes and stretching the hip
Yes.
flexors. You talked about how your hips felt sort of like there was a hard stop, like a bony block. Like that's a bone, what I'm feeling, blocking against another bone. And that's a very common experience. And that was my experience. And most people describe it as like, it's bone on bone, man. It's bone on bone. There's nothing I feel grinding, crunching like a bone smashing up against another bone. And then what makes it worse is you go to get a x-ray or to a doctor and they hold up this image in front of you and be like, see here, this, there's no space here. This is bone on bone. And it just sounds so, well, that's the end of the road. Like if it's bone on bone, you can't possibly do anything about it. And because it feels that way in your body, it becomes even more definitive of like surgery is the only option for that. If it's bone on bone, we have to reshape the bones or give you a new bone, just plug in a new bone and everything will be fine. But your experience and mine and the experience of a lot of people that I've talked to is that when you start to work on the muscles and deep targeted massage and the way you move, what used to feel like hard stop bone on bone, the sensation in your body can really change. And it can feel like, oh, this used to feel like hard stop. And now it feels kind of squishy, like a normal stretch. And
Yeah.
that's a really strange experience for most people and maybe even hard to believe until you've actually experienced it. But actually, yes, if you change the way, because muscles pull on bones and they move bones. So if your bones are in a bad position and you release some of the muscles around them and get the bone in a better position, maybe it can roll, slide, and glide better. Radical concept. So I'm glad that you mentioned that as well.
Yeah, it was really that's what frightened me the most was when I was like, oh, maybe I should start stretching again, and then just realizing like even with force, I couldn't push my leg down at like lower than a 45-degree angle on the left. And I just pushed and pushed, and I'm like, this doesn't feel like muscle, because normally with muscle you just like, oh, that feels so tight, and you can kind of push it down with your arm and just force it down, but I couldn't force it at all. And even like I said, sitting in a chair and crossing my legs so my ankle was over my knee, like where I couldn't do that at all without my hip being totally up like this. Like I have pictures of it, and it was, yeah, that's exactly what it feels like, is bone. Like how could this be muscle, because it's completely stuck, and I had never experienced that before. That's exactly. And doing the tests that you guys have at the beginning of your program to determine what to focus on, that's when I really was like, wow, this is much worse than I realized. And
Yeah.
the pain is unbelievable. And the popping, like people would hear it from across the house and say, what was that noise? And I'm like, that was my hip. And they're like, that's not normal. And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Poor old grandma's probably freaking out about what was going on with you.
She was with her hips replaced. And she's like, but you're so young. Like, I don't, and you have been so active. Like, how could that be? And she was just horrified. Yeah. And the limping was getting worse and worse and worse, especially
Yeah.
just the couch. I mean, I'd have to limp because I couldn't walk without severe pain from sitting to standing. Once I was walking around a bit, it would ease a little, but sitting to standing was excruciating. And getting in and out of the car, I had to turn my whole body to stand up out of my car because I couldn't swing my hip out like this, like you normally do to get out of your car, because the pain was so bad and the restriction was so bad. And the
Yeah.
left is the hip you swing out to get out of the car. So that was even worse. If I was in the
And
passenger car, it wasn't as bad.
uh
Mhm.
and now any problems getting out of the car or walking or the things that you used to have trouble with? Any troubles with that?
I haven't had any trouble. Like I do keep up with general foam rolling and general stretching and stuff like that, but I mean, I don't have to do it every day. It's not one of those things where it's like I'm not going to be able to get through the day if I don't do this. I don't have any pain. I don't have any restriction. And like I said, even pregnant, I don't feel any of that coming back, with increased, pressure and increased weight and stuff like that. I don't have any problems at all. No.
Wow. Super
Yeah.
cool. Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing this story. I think it's very, very helpful for people to see these conversations because then it's not just the creator of the program preaching about how good it is. It's just like, you talk, you tell me what your actual lived experience was. So thank you for doing that because I think it's going to give people hope because there's so many people that are dealing with similar situations. And when they hear someone just share their story, it's like, oh, that person's pretty similar to me. Like maybe there's hope for me too. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Ciao.